Hi everybody, and welcome to my videos, Healing Through Christ. So, in my series about signs of spiritual warfare, or signs that you are under a spiritual attack, or actually signs you are under a spiritual attack, I already went over number 1, constant mental and emotional torment. Number 2, severe opposition. So it's not the opposition itself, it's the severity of it, because everybody's going to face a little bit of opposition in everything they do, no matter what they do, even if they're doing stuff for themselves or for the enemy or something. It's the level of opposition, okay? If it's very high level opposition, okay? But that's but I went over that in the last video, hopefully. And now this is part 3, sudden calamity, or emergency, or tragedy. Sudden. So, let me tell you what the difference is between 2 and 3, because at first glance, they will seem similar. And some of the scriptures that I used in part 2, the last videos, can also apply to this as well. Okay? But I also want to show how this can affect anything. How this stuff can escalate. How this stuff can happen just all of a sudden. Okay? Yeah, you've not been, because sometimes it happens without warning. In fact, that's what the difference is between this and opposition. Sudden means it happens real fast without warning. Okay? Suddenly, something came up. Okay? The calamity part is something that, just like something that not just bad, like this really hard luck. Something all of a sudden came up, and it's either messing up your finances or something to that degree. And I'm gonna see if I can, and I'm gonna show you some scripture about it. So, again, some of the scriptures I mentioned yesterday, and don't pay any sign to that. That is one of my that is a notification on my phone. Don't pay no mind to that. I am turning my phone off. Okay, so like I am saying, like I was saying, if you heard that, some of the scriptures I used yesterday can also apply to this. Okay? So, let's once again go over Job 1:6 through 19. Although I'm going to split it up again into 6 through 12, then 13 through 19. Okay? Like I did yesterday in the last video, okay? Verse 6. Now there was a day when the sons of God came out, came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where do you come?" So Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, from walking back and forth on it." And then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil?" So Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job not fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, his household, and around and all that he he has on every side. You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. Now let's take a stop right there in verse 11. The devil tried to get Satan tried to get God to do it. Satan tried to get God to do his dirty work in verse 11. Okay? Keep that in mind. Verse 12, and the Lord said to Satan, Behold, all that he has is in your power, and do not lay a hand on his person. Only do not lay a hand on his person. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. So verse 12 clearly indicates that it is Satan that is causing all of this, that's causing all of Job's problems. Okay? Now notice, sudden calamity or emergency or tragedy. Sudden, okay? I'm going to focus very hard I'm going to focus on the sudden part. Okay? Because because all of this right here, everything that happened to Job, that I'm about to list in verses 13 through 19, those happened all of a sudden. Okay? Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing, and the donkeys feeding beside them, when the, I don't know how to pronounce that word, Sabians, however you pronounce that word, raided them and took them away. Indeed, they have killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Verse 16, while he was still talking, another also came and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Verse 17, while he was still speaking, another also came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 bands, raided the camels, and took them away, yes, and killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Verse 18, while he was still speaking, another also came and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and suddenly a great wind from across the wilderness and struck, when suddenly a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they are dead, and I alone have escaped to tell you. So, this right here all happened all of a sudden. Okay? These were sudden. Well, I guess you could say that these were sudden tragedies. Especially the death of Job's children. Now, I guess some might make an argument that the death of his servants would fall more on the level of calamity. But I guess that's a different discussion. But nonetheless, these were all suddenlies. Okay? Now, Job 2, 1 through 7. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, from where do you come? So Satan answers the Lord and says, from going to and fro on the earth and from walking back and forth on it. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and shuns evil, and still he holds fast to his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without cause? Verse 4, so Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin. Yes, all that a man has he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand now and touch his bones and his flesh, and he will surely curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, he is in your hand, but spare his life. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with painful boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Now again, this right here also happened suddenly. Of course, when you couple down to with chapter 1, all that happened, I guess technically you might put that in with what we talked about in yesterday's video, opposition, okay? Because these things can actually fall in both categories. Because the opposition part and this part, today's video, are very similar. Okay? But one of the differences, of course, is that it happens all of a sudden. Okay? Because sudden calamity, or emergency, or tragedy. Okay? Now, the calamity part is might be something that's at most an inconvenience. Okay? It's an inconvenience in your life. A big inconvenience that suddenly came up. Okay? Just suddenly came up, some kind of big inconvenience. And this convenience is all of a sudden this really bad luck just came at a really bad time. Okay? That's some kind of major inconvenience. Okay? The emergency part is it's more. Let's see. The emergency part is when it's worse than the inconvenient, than the calamity part. It's one step higher than calamity, in the sense that the emergency part now, it's you're looking at a life and death situation. Like there was a lot at stake. This isn't just some really hard luck. This isn't just some calamity. This is something that could be potentially life-changing. Okay? That's where the emergency comes in. It is very life or death situation, or a life-changing situation. Okay? Then, the tragedy part comes in with the sudden loss of someone that you love, a close friend or family or something along those lines. Even a pet, a close pet. Okay? Okay, something like that. That's when the tragedy comes in at. Okay? Like the very sudden death of a loved one, particularly someone young, or like maybe a severe car accident that took them out. That took out more than one family member at the same time. Okay? Anything along those lines. A sudden cancer diagnosis with months left to live could be an example of an emergency that's headed towards tragedy. So yeah, it's like tragic situation, like somebody getting killed by some natural disaster all of a sudden, because it is very sudden. It is usually very sudden, happens without warning, and before that happened, you're probably not experiencing the first two I just listed. Okay, and then this all of a sudden just came up out of nowhere. Okay? And by the way, usually when something like this happens, when something like that happens all of a sudden, that's where somebody might come up with these unbiblical sayings that sounds godly at face value, but actually are not. Okay? Something like, so something along the lines of, well, God works in mysterious ways. Or something along those lines. Okay? Or the Lord gives and takes away. And if you look into that verse, like the Lord gives and takes away, Job made that statement out of ignorance, not fully understanding what was going on. Okay? Although that did demonstrate his faith in God, that despite everything he was going through, he was still willing to trust God. But nonetheless, he made that statement out of ignorance because he did not know that Satan was the one causing his trouble. Okay? Let's see how long my video is so far. Okay, 16 minutes. I need to be moving along. Okay, so Ephesians 6:12, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. Okay, now let's see if I can find other. I probably should have brought up other examples of calamity, like as in a little bad luck, but I guess that could also be the persecution I mentioned yesterday toward the end of that video as well. The Christian persecution. Because at face value, it looks like bad luck. It's random bad luck. Especially if you're not experiencing the first two. Because you can experience any combination of these three that I just listed. Like, without noticing it. Like you don't have to experience all three of them. People rarely experience all three of these signs. Okay? Because the first one and the second one might go hand in hand. Because the enemy sometimes uses outside forces to then put these thoughts in your mind that affects your mental health. And then this right here, suddenly, something happens just randomly. Okay? The opposition part, that right there, you're doing something for God, or God has a calling for you, or God has a calling on your life, and all of a sudden somebody's just slandering your name. They're bullying, you're getting bullied, and you don't know why. Somebody's slandering your name. Okay, that right there is the opposition side. Okay? People acting mean to you, people acting hateful towards you. But the calamity side is more about circumstances. Okay? Severe. It's like here's more about severe circumstances. How the enemy works through circumstances. Okay? And it's either one of these things. And it might even start off as calamity and slowly progress to an emergency or a tragedy. Okay? Like a calamity, a sudden diagnosis of a disease. Then it gets worse. This disease suddenly leads to hospitalization. Then it gets worse. This disease, all of a sudden, it leads to death. Okay? So, for the sake of time, Yeah, I'm almost at the 20-minute mark. For the sake of time, I'm gonna use the book of Job. Not Job. I'm gonna use the story of Lazarus and bring something out. Okay? And for the sake of time, I have Lazarus. I have it split up into different categories, different levels. And I think that, in fact, that's probably what I'm gonna use. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so, and I'm going to use examples, before I get to Lazarus, I'm going to use examples of, a couple other examples of Jesus raising the dead as proof, as part of the proof that sudden deaths can be from the enemy. Oh, but first I need to look at it. I need to show you, let's see, yeah. 1 John 3:8. That idea is very important to start off with. He who sins is of the devil, for the devil has sinned from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of God was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. Okay? Think about it. Read them. Think about something. Look at all the miracles of Jesus. Okay? How many of them were ministry related? Healing the sick, raising the dead, casting out demons. Okay? How many of these ministries are... how many of those miracles are ministry related? And Jesus sent out his disciples. Here we go. In Matthew 10:7 and 8, this is Jesus speaking. And as ye go, preach, saying, the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, cleanse the leper, raise the dead, cast out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. You know, sickness could be viewed as a calamity if it happened all of a sudden, or as opposition, but nonetheless from the devil. Okay, notice, nonetheless, raise the dead. Okay, now, let's get to these examples. Ooh, this video's getting long. Alright. So, Jesus raised the dead, okay, in Matthew 9:18 through 26, and Mark 5:21-43, and Luke 8:40 through 56, also is the same incident when Jesus raised that 12-year-old girl from the dead. Then, in Luke chapter 7, verses 11 through 17, I guess that there was a funeral going on, and of a widow, okay, the widow's son. So a widow recently lost her son, and Jesus took compassion on her and raised his son from the dead. Okay? And again, seems like this lady might have experienced a sudden tragedy. Now, the story of the story of Lazarus, verses 1 through 44. Okay? And everybody's familiar with that story. Although I skipped a few, and I don't know if I'm going to have time, but I want to point something else, okay? Verses 1 through 6, you might put that under the category of calamity. Okay? Like Lazarus is sick. Is that sick? Like it's either the category of calamity or emergency. Okay? Then Jesus gives a message that the sickness would not be unto death, but for the glory of God. Okay, that God may be glorified through it. Okay? Next thing you know, Lazarus ends up passing away. Lazarus ends up dying. Now, if Jesus' statement about Lazarus' death, if Jesus' statement in verse 4 had been public knowledge, the moment that Lazarus died, Jesus would have looked like a false prophet and probably would have been perceived as a false prophet by today's standard. Okay? Okay, so what Jesus was saying here was that it was not going to end in death. Okay? So in other words, see, Jesus didn't say that Lazarus wasn't going to die. Jesus was saying that his death won't be the end of it. Okay? Then by the time Jesus gets there, it looks like it's too late. Everybody's mad at Jesus. Lazarus' sisters are mad at Jesus for not coming sooner. I'm having to rush through these stories, so... Okay, so... Verse 1 through 6... A situation arises. 11 through 17... It gets worse. 20 through 27... It looks completely hopeless. Let's see. And then in the last part, 38 through 44, victory. Okay? So yeah, this is one lesson you might take away from the story of Lazarus. Okay? About stuff can progressively get worse. Okay? Let's see where this video is at. Ooh, I did not plan for this video to get this long. But basically, the sudden calamity or a tragedy or a emergency or tragedy is slightly different than opposition and can actually go hand in hand with the opposition and be part of the opposition. What makes it stand out is this is something that can be all of a sudden, okay? Because nobody experiences only one of these attacks, okay? People experience any combination of these three that I just went over, okay? Mental and emotional torment, severe opposition, and sudden calamity or emergency or tragedy, okay? Any number of these things, okay? And remember, the key point of verse in number the third one just named is the suddenly part. Sudden, okay? Nobody's experiencing one of these things by themselves. Okay? If somebody's facing if somebody's is under mental and emotional torment, they're probably facing a little bit of opposition too. Maybe through bullying or something like that. Okay? Or, and sometimes, a close family member might just randomly die, just without warning. Last you knew they was healthy, now, without warning, they're suddenly gone. That could be an example of a sudden tragedy, especially for the young person. Now, there are some nuances to this. The sudden death of your 90-year-old grandmother or great-grandmother, that might not be a demonic attack or anything like that. Because the elderly people can pass away from natural causes. Okay? So you have to use wisdom and understand the nuances. Okay? But I'm talking about if the person was like more on the younger side and healthy last you knew, and they suddenly pass away without warning. Maybe from a medical condition that they didn't know that they had. Okay? That kind of stuff. I've heard of that happening before. The people, which may or may not be a spiritual attack. Okay? Because these things can be spiritual attacks. These things can be suddenly. And the third one, like I said, is the enemy working through circumstances. Okay? These are attacks, basically attacks through circumstances. Bad circumstances. And it can be a form of opposition. But it's not limited to just opposition. They sometimes can be very random. And happen all of a sudden. Okay? And usually when they're due, if you're familiar with biblical numerology, you can expect to see patterns, some signs. Okay, that's one way to tell. You can choose that biblical numerology. Every small detail matters. And since this video is getting long, I will have to save that for another video. So, tomorrow's video, I'm going to go over number 4. The fourth sign that you are under a demonic attack. And this one would probably be the most obvious. It's paranormal torment. Okay? Not only are you experiencing paranormal activity, but you are being tormented by the paranormal activity. Okay? Now these are being the other rare occasions, but most people experience the first 3 at any given time. There are more people who experience any combination of the first 3 I just listed than there are people who experience paranormal activity. Okay? And some people might assume that a lack of paranormal activity is proof that this is not demonic. Nope, that is not what this means. That's not what it means at all. Well, this video is getting long. I better end it right here. Thanks for enjoying this video. Bye. Well, thanks for watching.